Welcome back to Chris versus Everybody. This is a podcast where I talk about anything unedited and uncensored. This podcast is brought to you by the Crisscross Studios YouTube channel. Go ahead and click subscribe and click the notification bell on YouTube and follow the podcast on Spotify to be notified of new episodes. Thank you for your support. On today's episode, I will be responding to Ben Shapiro's take on George Floyd's killer, aka Officer Derek Chauvin, who was put in prison a few years ago for his wrongful arrest. I won't say wrongful arrest. He arrested him, but he detained him and killed him because he put his knee on his back of his neck, which made him suffocate and die. And the autopsy report shows that he died of asphyxiation to the neck. So he died because he was choked to death, basically. And he was thrown in prison. Thank the Lord. And we're going to talk about Donald Trump thinking he can just do whatever he wants to do without checks and balances for the government. And a lot of MAGA and conservatives think that he can do this. So I just really want to educate people about the three branches of government. And if you forgot what the three branches of government are before listening to this episode, I'm going to remind you during this episode what they are. And I also have a link in the description for a video for one of my favorite TV shows. I mean, I didn't watch it when I was a kid because I wasn't born yet. However, Schoolhouse Rock has a video explaining how the government works in a three-ring circus. It's a three-ring circus. That's pretty much how the government is, figuratively and literally. It's a circus. But every branch of government has powers, and no branch of government is bigger than the other. Okay? So we're going to talk about that right now because the Supreme Court recently rejected the Trump administration's attempt to freeze nearly $2 billion in foreign aid, marking a significant legal setback for the administration's efforts to reallocate federal funds without congressional approval. Yes, everybody, Congress controls the money, not the president. Nothing goes into effect without Congress's approval. Okay? In a 5-4 decision, which the Supreme Court is 6-3 conservative, so in a 5-4 decision, that's pretty substantial. A huge decision in this Supreme Court, the 6-3 conservative majority Supreme Court. In a 5-4 decision, the court denied the administration's emergency appeal to maintain the funding freeze. The majority, which included Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett, upheld a lower court's lower mandating to prompt the release of funds to the U.S. Agency for International Development, which is USAID, partners and staff contractors, and State Department contractors as well. The administration had argued that the president possesses broad authority to impound federal funds, especially in matters of foreign policy. However, the court found that his action and that action that he did likely violated the appropriations clause of the United States Constitution, which grants Congress exclusive power over federal expenditures. So they were like, yo, president, that's Congress's job. You sit the fuck down. That's basically what the Supreme Court just did. And to put it in more simpler terms for people who still don't understand how the government works, the United States government is divided into three branches, each with distinct powers and responsibilities to ensure a system of checks and balances. Just like what the Supreme Court just did to Donald Trump. They said, yo, you can't do this. First, we're going to talk about the legislative branch because that seems to be the big problem right now in the United States. People don't understand how the government works. Majority of what we don't see behind the curtain is inside the legislative branch. We usually see the president always on TV signing things, doing speeches, all that stuff. That's the executive branch. And then you have the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court. But we're going to talk about the legislative branch right now. The legislative branch makes the laws. No law can be put into office without being made and voted on in Congress. Congress is divided into two separate entities. It's divided into the House of Representatives, which every representative is based on the state population. So some states might have one representative. Some, actually, they might have one or two. Some might have one or two. Some might have 55, like California. Based on the 2020 U.S. Census, it's each representative currently represents 761,000 people. So if California has 55 representatives, that's a lot of people. Okay. A lot of states gained populations over the years, but we'll talk about that on another day. But right now, each representative represents roughly 750,000 people. So on a perfect day, there are 435 representatives. And then that's the House of Representatives. The leader of the House of Representatives is called the Speaker of the House, which is voted on by Congress. Okay? That's one side. The other side is the Senate, which every state has 2 senators. So that's easy. 2 senators times 50 states, 100 senators. So you have 435 representatives and you have 100 senators. So 535 members of Congress on a good day. There are some empty seats right now, but we'll get to that in the midterm elections in 2026. But right now, think 535. 100 senators, 435 representatives. Their job is to pass laws, approve budgets, and oversee the president to see if he ain't wilding out. Their job is to check the president of the United States. Okay? Another thing for the legislative branch. When something is, petitioned or suggested to be a law, on either side, not Congress, but the House or the Senate has to vote on it. If it passes in the Senate, it has to go to the House, which it also has to pass in order to go to the president. Okay? Nothing happens unless it goes to the president. Same and vice versa. If it's passed in the House, it goes to the Senate, and then it goes to the president. That's how it works. Now let's go to the president, which is the executive branch. The executive branch enforces the laws. Of course, it's the president, who is also the commander-in-chief of the military. It includes the vice president, his cabinet, and various federal agencies. Their responsibilities are responsibility for implementing the laws. They are responsible for conducting foreign policy, and they oversee national defense. Their job is to, quote unquote, protect us. Their job is to, quote unquote, make deals with foreign leaders. Their job is to implement the laws. Okay? So many things go through the president's office every day. There's a lot of things the president does for only $400,000 a year, which is wild. Okay? And finally, we have the judicial branch, which is the Supreme Court, which interprets the laws. They consist of the Supreme Court and the federal courts that are lower than them. They ensure that laws follow the U.S. Constitution and resolve disputes. And they have the power of judicial review, meaning it can declare laws or executive actions unconstitutional. That means if the president does something Like, I don't know, say that you can move these federal funds from these people to these people without Congress approval, they can say that's unconstitutional. Like what they did last week. Now the separation of powers and checks and balances ensures that no single branch becomes too powerful. That's what Trump wants. He wants to be powerful. He wants to take away all of these government agencies so we can have direct power over everything, which is not good when you're talking about the United States government in the history where we came from. We came from a dictatorship, and now we're trying to go back to that. I don't understand. But if you really need a visual of how checks and balances work, like I said earlier, I did share the Schoolhouse Rock 3-ring circus video in the description. You're welcome. Now we're going to talk about one of my favorite podcasts / independent conservative media juggernaut, which is Ben Shapiro. He said some things last week that really didn't gel with me. Usually I listen to all points of view, and the point that he put about Derek Chauvin, which is the person who murdered George Floyd, is just made me sit back a bit and be like, okay, now you're talking crazy, because we clearly saw the evidence. We clearly watched what this man did for 9 minutes as this man died in front of our eyes on social media. You couldn't escape it. And then when people revolted and said Black Lives Matter, not saying that we're trying to help the financial cause of Black Lives Matter, because we know what that happened. The woman cheated us. The woman stole money. The woman embezzled. The woman bought 8 mansions in California. That we don't care about that. We're talking about the message of Black Lives Matter. The Black Lives Matter message is that police are killing Black and brown people at a high rate. Yes, they kill white people as well. But when it comes to having stuff on camera, like we had with George Floyd, the message is that we need to stop police brutality. We need to stop this violence against Black people. That's what Black Lives Matter means. And what did the conservatives, white people, and the law enforcement community do? They made Blue Lives Matter, saying that our lives are at danger too. Well, yes, your lives are at danger. That's why you took the fucking job in the first place. You're a fucking police officer. But that doesn't mean you put your knee on somebody for 9 minutes after they said they couldn't breathe, after being placed under arrest. When they're placed under arrest, if they're not resisting or causing you any fear for your life, you should at least say, okay, my bad. You can't breathe. Let's stay right here. Okay? This man chose not to, as well as his commanding officer and the supervisor and 2 other officers that were right there watching him. We saw the video. The response of Blue Lives Matter to Black Lives Matter was a complete diss. Just disrespect to the Black community. Now, yes, your feelings are valid to think that, hey, my life matters too. But when you do it in response to something that, the cause of something that was so profound in the late 2010s, in the 2020s, just think about it from the outside. If you're a fly looking down, that people are being killed by people who are supposed to protect and serve them, and then you say, oh, my life matters too. Look how that sounds. And think about that when you put your Blue Lives Matter flag up in a government office. Think about that when you have your Blue Lives Matter magnet on your car. Yes, you might think like, yeah, I support the police. But you're also showing other people that, hey, fuck Black Lives Matter. Which is a very huge percentage of people who are doing this. I've worked with people who have Blue Lives Matter flags. And they said the exact same thing I'm saying right now. The Black Lives Matter movement, yeah, okay. All right. But anyway, conservative commentator Ben Shapiro initiated a petition urging President Trump to pardon Derek Chauvin's federal convictions, arguing that societal pressures compromise the trial's impartiality. You know what? It didn't, Ben. It didn't. When you have evidence, the jury has to convict the defendant without any bias, without any, like, come on. You're a lawyer, Ben. How? How is this societal pressures? You literally killed a black man in cold blood in 9 minutes with your knee on his neck. A lot of people recorded it. It went viral in 2020 of all years, when people are at home staring at their phones all day. People were tired and they went to the streets. Just like Michael Brown in 2014, 2015. Just like Gardner in 2014. Just like Rodney King, who survived, by the way. They just beat his ass with an inch of his life. You killed a man, Derek Chauvin. Just like the 92 riots, just like the 65 riots, it's the same thing. If you don't learn your history, you're doomed to repeat it. This was another black man killed by the police. And in 2020, we learned our history so much, we were not going to let this man get away with murder. Now, contrast to what happened in 1992, because in 1992, the officers were acquitted, and they went and had an uprising in Los Angeles, as well as cities around the country. And in 2020, the people, first in Minneapolis, because the situation happened in Minneapolis, Minnesota, people were tired, and they went to the streets saying, yo, no justice, no peace. Justice would be putting this officer in prison. And in Minnesota, they don't have the death penalty, so life in prison, we'll take that. I think now he's serving I believe it's a 20-year sentence, 22-year sentence. That, I mean, he'll get out, but, it says 22 years in prison. So, I mean, I guess that's a win for the black community. Actually, for America in general. Like, they're just, police officers, like I said earlier, aren't just killing black and brown people. They kill white people just as much, However, statistics don't lie, folks. Statistics don't lie. There's far less black people in this country than white people. So if you kill 10 black people versus 10 white people, you're pretty much statistically killing more black people than white people. It's just a fact. But let's go over what happened in Minneapolis that day. So George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, was arrested outside a convenience store in Minneapolis, Minnesota, after a store employee suspected him of using a counterfeit $20 bill. Derek Chauvin was one of the officers that responded to the complaint. He arrested him and then knelt on his neck for 9 minutes. He shouted, "I can't breathe," countless times as he slowly died. Now, the Hennepin County, which is what the county that Minneapolis is in, the ME, or the medical examiner's report, said that the death was ruled a homicide. That means the officer killed him in cold blood. This wasn't self-defense. This wasn't a shootout with police. This was someone getting arrested. The person getting arrested saying, I can't breathe, and the officer not complying or not listening to the arrestees or the detainees' complaints, and killed him. The listed cause was cardiopulmonary arrest, complicating law enforcement subdual, restraint, and neck compression. Now, a lot of conservative media, primarily Fox News, and of course now Ben Shapiro, have noted that Floyd had a heart condition, and he had fentanyl and meth in his system. However, these did not cite as primary causes of his death. He died because he was choked. He couldn't breathe. And I want to say this on my podcast today. I don't care if he had weed in his system. I don't care if he had Jamba Juice in his system. I don't care if he had orange juice. I don't care if he had heroin in his system. Heroin in his system. The video shows a cop choking somebody to the point where he could not breathe for 9 minutes, and he died. So I don't care if he had meth or fentanyl in his system. And you shouldn't care either. You should be caring that someone died. Just because you're arrested doesn't mean you're guilty of the crime. In this country, you're innocent until proven guilty. And a lot of people, especially a lot of white people, conservatives, and Ben Shapiro, thought that his death was justified. And that is a red flag for what's to come later in my life, my daughter's life, my kid's life, my wife's life, and black people in this country for years to come. Derek Chauvin was convicted of murder and manslaughter and sentenced to 22 years in prison. The case led to worldwide protests, worldwide, not just the United States. This is worldwide. But doesn't mean that the federal convictions were based on societal pressures. If you didn't kill him by choking, then you would be free right now, Derek. What made you think that choking somebody to death was the right thing to do? And I don't care if you had a bad day. People have bad days. But when you're a law enforcement officer, you have to enforce the law. Doesn't mean you're above the law. And we'll get to that in a second. And like I said earlier, his conviction was based on overwhelming evidence. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, this conviction was justified. Justice was served. Now, was it the right punishment? No. Justice was served, though. He got 22 years. Overwhelming evidence, including video footage and testimony from fellow officers. So your officer snitched on you. Your friends, the brothers in blue, snitched on your ass. Which is what they're supposed to do. That's integrity. And I want to talk about police accountability and integrity real quick, because that seems to be unveiling now, because now we have body cams and programs for cops to be like, hey, I did this and blah, blah, blah. We have community boards to keep cops accountable and all that stuff. And that's good. Because back in the day, it was either the cop's word or no one's word at all. So a lot of people were sent to prison for little things. A lot of people were sent to prison that were innocent. So we're going to talk about why police accountability is important. And I'm specifically talking to Ben Shapiro, the lawyer in this whole thing. Police accountability is important because equal justice under the law is pretty primarily the thing when it comes to defending your case, either defense or if you're the plaintiff. Equal justice under the law. No one, including law enforcement, should be above the law. Accountability ensures that the officers are held to the same legal standards as civilians, which really doesn't happen usually, because usually the law community sides with a law enforcement officer, which is another double entendre that I'll talk about later. Public trust. When officers are held accountable, it increases community trust in law enforcement, which is essential for effective policing. You're right. Prevention of abuse of power. Without oversight, unchecked power can lead to misconduct, excessive force, or even corruption, just like Derek Chauvin. Better policing standards. Accountability encourages officers to follow the best practices, receive better training, and act professionally in all situations. Justice for victims. When police violate citizens' rights or use excessive force, like in Derek Chauvin's case, accountability ensures that victims receive justice, like 22 years in prison. You break the law, you do the time. Now we have forms of police accountability, which I just talked about earlier. We have body cameras and dash cams to provide transparency and evidence in police interactions. We have civilian oversight boards, which are independent review boards to help ensure fair investigations into police conduct. We have stronger disciplinary measures. Officers found guilty of misconduct should face legal consequences, including termination of criminal charges. Not or, and. If you are found guilty of misconduct, not should you only lose your job. You shouldn't be able to find another job as a police officer somewhere else. And you should have criminal charges on your permanent record. But because a lot of these police officers, especially the ones who are the ones responsible for the people that we can't forget their names, like Breonna Taylor, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, a lot of these police officers were police officers somewhere else. They got fired for misconduct, and then they went somewhere else and did the same thing. We need to stop these police officers from finding new jobs. Okay? At this point, some of these officers shouldn't even be working as a greeter at Walmart. Okay? Their job, especially the ones who kill innocent people, should be bent over at Rikers, bent over at San Quentin right now as someone's bitch. Not a traffic cop on I-96 or desk duty downtown. They should be fired. Not put on leave without pay, fired, terminated. And the chiefs that hire these people should also be talked about. Okay? So please, everybody, vote for mayors that ensure that police accountability is important. Vote for mayors who not only think of law and order, but think of just and fair, who will hire the right officers to do the right jobs. There have been improved training policies like de-escalation tactics, anti-bias training, and stricter use of force policies that can prevent excessive force incidents like the one in Minneapolis. And legal recourse. All victims of police misconduct should have clear avenues to seek justice, including civil lawsuits and criminal prosecution of officers when necessary. So why is accountability so important? Accountability is important because not only do people deserve justice, people also need to trust and know that the police are going to protect and serve. While accountability is crucial, the officers, because we talked about what to do to officers, and we usually talk about what officers have to do. So the police officers also need fair legal protections. Like they're the sometimes, or most of all the time, they're defendant in all these cases. So officers must be able to perform their duties without fear of unfair prosecution when acting lawfully. Sometimes you gotta shoot somebody. Sometimes you gotta knock someone upside the head. Okay? But with these body cameras, did you do it because you had to do it, or because you felt like you had, because you felt like you had to do it because they looked a certain way, talked to you a certain way, blah, blah, blah. Better mental health support. We understand that a police officer's job is stressful, but the proper mental health support can help prevent poor decision making in high pressure situations. And clearer rules of engagement. Police officers need well-defined policies on the use of force, traffic stops, and arrests that can prevent confusion and unnecessary confrontations. Sometimes police officers just need to understand how people work. Some police officers just need to know and understand how other cultures and how other communities work to de-escalate and just avoid unnecessary things to happen. Just like what happened with George Floyd. I believe if Derek Chauvin, one, had a better mental state of mind, better recollection of how to de-escalate things and how to arrest somebody, that maybe George Floyd would be alive today. Maybe Tamir Rice would be alive today. Maybe Breonna Taylor would be alive today. Maybe Eric Gardner would be alive today. Just maybe. In conclusion, accountability does not mean anti-police. I'm not anti-police. A lot of my friends are police officers. Accountability does not mean I'm being anti-police. It just means I'm ensuring that law enforcement operates ethically, fairly, and justly. A well-regulated police force improves public safety, strengthens community relationships, and ensures that justice is applied equally to all. If Derek Chauvin gets pardoned, it is setting a precedent for a very dark future for all Americans, more specifically Black and brown communities of this great country. So, Ben Shapiro, I understand where you're coming from, but I believe you just said that just to get clicks and views. Because I know you, a Jew, know everything about persecution and being killed off statistically more than quote unquote white people. And we'll get into that conversation on another day. So you, Ben Shapiro, a Jew, should not be talking about, oh, a white man killing a black man should be pardoned because of societal pressures, when clearly we have evidence beyond a shadow of a doubt. So please, Ben Shapiro, actually do some real reporting and real editorials and stop getting stuff for likes and clicks, because you know you're wrong. And a lot of people believe that you're wrong. You might get a spike in viewership. You might get no views. You might get less views for your show after what you just said. But I'm responding to you right now. And I think that Derek Chauvin should rot in prison. I think he should be someone's bitch. That's just me. What do y'all think? Should Derek Chauvin be pardoned? because of societal pressures that everybody was rioting and protesting that black people shouldn't be killed and that he should be let out because black tears. No, he should be in prison because we have evidence you killed somebody and justice was served. 22 years, you'll be out. What is that? He was sentenced in 2022, 2023, so he'll be out in 2045. No problem. All right. So that's been another episode of Kris versus Everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Kris versus Everybody. I would like you guys to tune into the Crisscross Corner podcast, where I myself, Kris Canty, and my friends, the Great Debaters, dive into fun discussions on pop culture, music, trending topics, and everything in between. Whether you're looking for laughs, hot takes, or just something to vibe to, the Crisscross Corner has got you covered. Listen now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. Follow and share your thoughts using hashtag Crisscross Corner. That's my spiel for my other podcast. But listen to the Kris versus Everybody podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube now. Go click YouTube and click subscribe and click the notification bell to be notified of future episodes. Also shop for my merch at crisscrosscorner.com. Thank you for listening, everybody. See you guys next time.